I'm Melly.
I'm Liam.
And this is Beggars Believe, home of scams, shams, hoaxes, pranks, and charlatans. Stories that you shouldn't believe because someone is lying.
They're all lying.
Yes, yes. This time I don't have any fruit to offer you.
No fruit?
Yeah, I know.
But I'm hungry.
Oh, we just came back from breakfast. So for today's story, we're going to two dark places that I unfortunately know too well.
Oh dear.
One is the old internet, and two is New Jersey.
Oh no. AOL. The good old days.
Even before AOL. This is This is before peer-to-peer. This is before anything. And this is actually what's considered one of the internet's oldest hoaxes, or its earliest ever hoax that we're going to be covering today. And the setting of the place, which is a real place in New Jersey in the Pine Barrens. So, we're going...
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we're going hardcore here.
Yeah, we are.
This manages to encompass interdimensional travel, spiritual gurus, masochism, coffee runs, and Lego.
Lego.
So,
seems appropriate.
Yeah, so that's...
the root of most evil, you know?
So that's kind of where we're going today. So hang on to your hat. But we're going to start off with the location for all of this. In New Jersey, there is a real place called Ong's Hat.
Ong's Hat.
Yes, spelled O-N-G, pronounced like M. Night Shyamalan shitting all over the memory of a beloved protagonist.
Okay.
Ong's
Ong's
Hat. It's located in Burlington County in the T-Burn Forest. The area is host to a whole bunch of ghost towns and abandoned places, and sits on the edge of the Pine Barren, as I said before. I got this whole book called Ghost Towns of New Jersey just to research this place, and it's like a third of the book is just this area of towns that no longer exist in New Jersey.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
Maybe for good reason.
Well, it is Jersey.
Yeah.
We're Pennsylvanians. We're allowed to.
We're allowed to say that. There's like a weird unspoken, very spoken.
But very spoken, sometimes with lots of curse words and very loudly. Even in historical research, Ong's Hat, the actual place, is this weird-ass question mark. So some places that you find when you're researching say this used to be this really rowdy, lawless town, dance halls, bootlegging, prize fighting, whole nine yards. Other reports say that at its peak, it was just this small cluster of homesteads. We don't even know what this place is in real life.
Either it was the Wild Wild West or funky little house hometown.
Or Little House on the Prairie. So there's conflicting reports on how the place got its name. Ong's Hat, unusual name. There was a popular story that a Swedish man named Jacob Ong, who was in the area in 1835, he's this real rake. He loved dancing, drinking, ladies. He brought in those ladies by virtue of having just this really nice hat.
Oh.
Yeah, this was when dating was easy.
That's all you need.
Yeah.
A good frock and you're set for a good frock.
So one of the women he wooed was furious that he had slighted her. So he grabbed his really nice hat off his head, stomped on it flat, and threw it up in a tree where it stuck in the branches of the tree, apparently long enough for people to name the town after this hat.
So his hat was that iconic that it was like, yep, we're going to name this town after it.
So this other story that was that Ong himself had gotten shit-faced drunk and just thrown his own hat in the tree. And again, that they just named this place after this hat in a tree because that was what was going on at the time. There's a third tale that says it wasn't a hat in a tree, but rather that Ong owned the tavern and had a hat painted on the tavern sign.
Okay. I like the first story has more whimsy, but yeah.
Yeah, The most likely option in my book is that it was a midway point to transport grain from the harbor to the mill. So they had an overnight spot that was a hut owned by a guy named Ong, and they misread it, and Ong's hut became Ong's hat. But all of that speculation to the side, this place is marked on like Revolutionary War era maps. So something was there. It was probably a tricorn. I don't
And it belonged to Ong.
Yes, the cartography
hat.
found it, whether it be a hut or a hat.
I
A
prefer
small building or haberdashery, something was there. But by the time 1900 rolled around, and again, this is a matter of fact, in the census, there were only 7 residents in Ong's hat, but the town just kind of continued to really be weird. 2 of the people who were listed there in 1900 were a man named John Chiminski and his wife, who didn't get a name.
Didn't get it.
Apparently, one day he claimed that his wife just up and vanished. There's questions, but John himself fled to New York City not long afterwards.
Did she exist to begin with, though?
Well, a few years later, one of the remainder of the locals came across a woman's skeleton in the woods nearby. And for whatever reason, the sheriff of Burlington kept the skull on his desk until the day he retired.
I thought that was illegal.
It was 1900.
Oh,
you know?
yeah. They didn't really have many rules back then.
Yeah, but by the 1930s, there's one elderly man still living there in the census, and with his death, the town, however big it had been, however it got its name, essentially disappeared. There's a few foundations remaining, apparently, and you have to hike to get out there.
Oh.
So, yeah, if you ever feel like a challenging hike, you can go on out to the former site of Ong's hat.
Ong's hat.
Ong's
Maybe I'll find the
hat.
hat. It might still be in the tree.
So apparently this was a really, foundational hat, yes.
I imagine rhinestones, glitter, pheasant feathers. And for some reason, it's yellow to me.
The man in the yellow hat. The Ong in the yellow hat.
Exactly.
How many rhinestones did he have? Ong's hat is this weird real-world place, and it's a great location to set a fictional story.
Mm-hmm.
The creators of this tale told the story, though, in a way that was completely alien for the era. Instead of a forward tale, the story was leaked in little bits and pieces, all out of order. It's written as first-hand accounts. It's written as reports. It's written as, like,
Give me my
messages back and
armadillo
back.
We're going in.
So people finding this story that I'm going to tell you would find it in little bits and snippets and pamphlets and Xerox papers. In this collection of works, it was known as Ong's Hat, Incunabula. The earliest pieces to be found date all the way back to 1988, which was when they started working on this story. Role-played posts, letters, you'd find something. You'd find a pamphlet that talked about Princeton scientists raided by the government, or that there was a reality banding tantric abilities, and it was in the Xerox zine of the underground era press that you got at the time. And it's these little bits and pieces, and then you'd have to work to find out more of the story.
Oh, okay.
Today we would call it an ARG, but that didn't exist back then. With the advent of the internet, same as actually last week, I got to go cruising around old internet the last couple of weeks. This kind of just took on a life of its own. Early bulletin boards, file sharing services would have little bits and pieces on them. You could acquire them more quickly. Other people started getting involved. And this is before Google. I poked around and I found these old boards that mentioned this. The internet at the time is this crazy, decentralized, wasteland, Nobody knows what to make of this in these forum posts. And they're getting enough bits and pieces of the story where it's like, well, that sounds plausible, but that's not, and no one knows what to do. It was really kind of fascinating to watch how this unrolled. So before we talk about who made this whole hoax, we need to cover what its contents actually were. Now, this, again, is pieced together from all of these fragments that they sort of seeded the world with. Mostly this was pieced together by an internet researcher named Danny Unger. So this is a vague synopsis of this tale. And I have to stress, everything I am about to say is total bullshit. These are not real people. These are not real events. And it goes in depth for something that is not. In the 1950s, members of the Moorish Science Temple of Newark had members break off to form their own sects. These members were all Caucasian jazz musicians and poets.
Oh, God.
And the group they created was called the Morris Orthodox Church of America. They all took off traveling the world, learning philosophy, magic, and spiritual practices. And one of these members was a man named Wally Fard.
Wally Fard?
Yeah, that sounds
Where's
like...
Wally?
It sounds like a name that you'd get a default on something.
Yeah.
Fard finished up his travels in 1978 and spent many of the remaining savings buying 200 acres in the Pine Barrens, including Ong's Hat. He decided to create a sort of compound there dedicated to spirituality, politics, tantra, and psychopharmacy. The original members included runaway kids from Paramus and 2 lesbian anarchists.
Obviously.
Yes, exactly. They called themselves the Moorish Science Ashram, and the ashram was a Sanskrit word that means basically a monastery. It's an actual Hindu term that they just sort of borrowed here. So Fard has to spread his beliefs in the early 1980s, and the most logical way, of course, to do that of the time is through the power of Xerox machines.
Oh, okay. I was like, the power of people that have nowhere else to go?
Well, there was some of that, too. Yeah.
I'm like, what?
So he sends out newsletters. He gets converts who flock to this cult of Ong's Hat. Again, none of this ever actually happened.
I'm getting oh, this poor guy, these poor people are getting tricked.
This isn't true. So among these were scientists named Frank and Althea Dobbs. The 2 Dobbs had their own backstory. They were raised in Texas by a cult that worshipped UFOs and had grown up with rather non-traditional beliefs because of it.
Probing.
I said non-traditional.
Non-traditional, I'm sorry. Let's keep Catholic out of this.
Their previous works had been at Princeton, where they were both apparently going for PhDs. They thought about going through what they called cognitive chaos, that they could tap into the unused portions of their brain, and by doing so, stop aging and cure all diseases.
Oh, the cure for life.
Princeton expelled them.
Okay.
So even in this fictional story, these 2 fictional people couldn't make it at Princeton. So joining the ashram was a chance for them to continue their research, and there's no ethical oversight committee in the Pine Barrens. They could pretty much do whatever they wanted. So the Dobbs set up a laboratory in a trailer and founded the Institute of Chaos Studies.
The Institute of Chaos Study. Death becomes her.
I love this. That should be like on my resume. Graduate of the Institute of Chaos Studies. And through this institute, they created a device called the egg. It looked like this, Is that
where Lady Gaga was born out
of? Possibly, actually.
It's the giant egg.
Yeah, it sort of looked like a pod large enough to hold a reclining person. It acted as complete sensory deprivation chambers with attachment to the brain. They'd put people in it, chart their brain waves, and then put them through a series of experiments to see what their brain waves did. These experiments were drugs, hypnosis, lots of pain, and sex. And apparently they thought that these experiments would teach them when a wave becomes a particle.
Oh, but brainwave becoming particles.
I've been a lot of places where there are a lot of those things happening without an egg, and I've never seen a wave become a particle.
Yeah, no.
No, I would have noticed that. I think that was, drinks half price. So their goal was to learn how to manipulate reality itself. So they'd gone through 3 itinerations of the egg when they hooked one up to one of the Paramus runaways to the thing.
Oh, God.
They turn it on, and both the runaway...
Come on, sweetie, take this LSD and get in the egg. We're going to poke you with a prod to make magic.
Look deep into my eyes, take this LSD and this cattle prod and get in the damn egg.
Yeah, exactly. What?
We're trying to make a wave a particle.
Yes, as long as I get the second portion of dinner.
When they turned on the egg in this situation, the runaway and the egg both just disappear. 7 minutes later, it returned, and somehow in the brief period of time of only 7 minutes, the runaway figured out everything about the place he had been. It was an alternate dimension, one exactly the same as our world, but devoid of people. So the Dobbs referred to this trans-dimensional opening as the gate and started to experiment it using the egg. Again, none of this is true.
That sounds super fantastic.
Yeah, it is.
An introvert's dream.
Yes. Something happens at this point that forces the members of the ashram to leave their compound. One telling of the story is that there was a chemical spill at nearby Fort Dix, which was spewing nuclear wastes into their camp. The other story is that the government got wind of the gate and stormed the compound, killing people and forcing them to retreat. But depending on which story you read, this government was American, it was Russian, or it was Danish.
The Danish.
Because But regardless, in the story, the members of the Moorish science ashram apparently just decided to leave, not to a new place, but to this other dimension. So one by one, they used the egg to just vanish into the other dimension and just occasionally pop back to get supplies. But the main supply they're always out of that they're popping back for is coffee.
That's insane.
As I said,
I'm like, none of this is
none
true.
of this is true. The only thing true is that there's this weird place called Ong's Hat. The rest of this is made up.
It gives me so many questions.
Yes. So one of the scientists in the story is quoted as saying, "On the other side of the gate, we found the Payan Barrens similar to us, but in a world which apparently had never developed human life. Of course, we've since visited a number of other worlds, but we decided to colonize this one, our first Newfoundland. We still live in the same scattering of weather gray shacks, Airstream trailers, recycled chicken coops, and mail-order yurts, only a bit more spread out and considerably more relaxed."
Hold up.
How did they get an Airstream through a time portal is my question.
And yurts.
See, a yurt, like you could take a bit of cloth at a time. Yurts fold down good, but you're not getting an Airstream through an egg.
No.
That's like one of those like rich man through the eye of a camel things.
Can we fit a trailer?
Can I bring a hot tub? If I'm going to like leave all of humanity behind, I kind of want my creature comforts.
I kind of want a cow. At least it'll be, be a buddy, food.
There would be a limited food source.
I know. Well, what would they do for food over there,
They can
Nothing was
grow.
cultivated.
They could cultivate.
Well, yeah, they would have to start from scratch.
Oh, it's okay. So, who came up with this whole story in reality? The main creator was a man named Joseph Matheny. Supposedly, he had this group of co-creators who are still unnamed, but he describes them as such. One was an artist who made beautiful, moving, and otherworldly collages and pictures. One was a poetic terrorist who could weave words together with an unparalleled passion and vigor. Another was a media and network hacker who could make the media pay attention to a bingo match in Poughkeepsie if he wanted them to. One was a physicist with a lot of friends in the dancing Wheeloo master circles and a wonderful twisted sense of sexual humor. Now that is just Matheny's words. They could all be made up as well.
And with these powers combined.
Yes, they were bananimous, so they couldn't be completely fake too. But there were still other people influencing the story as it developed, because like I said, it developed fairly organically to a certain point. People added their own expertise to the mythos, making the story more robust as they went. Matheny chose to actually participate in this as it grows as sort of a character who also existed in this story. He claimed all the documents were real and that he had just found them and taken them to the public, that he was not the creator, he was just the person who sent it to them, that he used the bulletin boards, file transfer systems, get that out into the world. The book catalog he posted was called Incanaluba, a catalog of rare books, manuscripts, and curiosa, conspiracy theory, frontier science, and alternative worlds. He claimed to have interviewed one of the physicists who was actually in the book, a character in the book, and he interviewed the person he claimed was the real author of some of the papers.
And mind you, again, none of these people are real.
No, he's just basically inserting himself as sort of the step between.
Schizophrenia, that he's having conversations with his other beings inside him in his own little universe, and that's the world he's talking about, is like his
that would be
psyche.
Fucking amazing, actually. Have an entire... See, you could have made this so much more fun. See, we are not actually the dimension that made the egg. It's a different dimension, but he's tapped into it.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Get my HBO special now.
So there's this interview Matheny did with the New World Disorder, and it outright asks a lot of questions about this, and I was like, answering questions about Ong's Hat, great, this is going to solve a lot of things, and it did not.
Well, he is a fester of the chaos, so of course it wouldn't.
The responses he gave made a lot of sense if you pictured a bong hit every now and again.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
Not a banana bong.
No, not a banana bong. But he did state that he and the other creators of the hoax made a pact that the story would follow 3 laws, which is actually 4 laws, so I'm a little bit confused. But the laws were, never let it be used to start a cult. Let it be used as a platform to piss down the back of anyone who gave blood, sweat, and tears to make it realized. If a channel became available that would make it more accessible to more people and money was involved, always give the money away. And when and if it becomes too much to manage, toss it into the public domain via free game or something like that. So there's plenty of fans of the story. They call themselves eggheads.
Like, don't start a cult. We're gonna name
Ourselves
ourselves
eggheads.
Definitely not a cult. Just take the LSD and the cow prod and get in the egg.
Get in the egg. It's covered on Coast to Coast with AM with Art Bell, which was a whole radio show that was very popular back in the time. A lot of people who found this story didn't know what the hell to make of it. Like I said, nothing had been told in this sort of real world, but not vein and leaked like this. This is a totally new thing. Matheny himself has said that the response came to two camps, basically. The majority view it as what it was and what it was meant to be, a joke that should have flamed out there years ago. The other believes it to be true, or at least partially true, and is willing to jump to any lengths of breaking logic to believe it, bringing in the belief that all sorts of other conspiracy theories and shadowy organizations are involved. And literally, if you go to the like bulletin boards of the time, if you can think of a conspiracy that existed in the late 90s, it was being tied into the egg. It is insane.
Everything has to do with the egg.
It is. The egg was the nexus. There were people who really bought into this and believed it, you know. New Jersey had to deal with people coming out to the pine barrens, literally going around and looking for a hat and a tree and an egg in a field, you know.
My next trip, what are you talking about?
You're buying coffee. Are you a scientist from a different dimension?
Yeah.
Hey, you, are you trying to get an Airstream and an egg? But what they had actually done with all of this was to create the world's first ARG. Before that was even an idea that existed. And if you're really looking, when you look at any modern ARG, you see the influences of it there. The way the information is seeded out across things, the blending in of real world facts, the publishing things as though it's a real world. Anything you come across today, creepypastas, SCPs, all of the ARGs that are blended in that are selling stuff to us now, they kind of have their roots back into this. To call out one in particular, though, Lego created a show called Galador, Defenders of the Outer Dimension, for Canadian obvious. It was introduced by an ARG. The show follows a protagonist who travels in a ship called the Egg to other dimensions. Only in the show there's Gorms, which is, you know, the difference.
Yeah.
There's a surprising lack of Gorms in this story.
That guy should have got a copyright.
See that? His works.
Story, 'cause, like, isn't that copyright infringement right there? Or
so
unless he didn't own his own crazy story, I guess.
He's actually been implicated into another bunch of other hoaxes since, and the most noticeable one is John Teeter, it's pronounced both ways sometimes, who is supposedly this time traveler.
Okay.
It is a deep rabbit hole, and he has been kind of softly put forward as the person who originated that. And that one goes down this really interesting who owns what when it's essentially a collaborative fiction. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of places that have done deep dives on that I'm fascinated at that.
Well, I could see why people could like get into it because like who wouldn't want the idea of becoming Doctor Who?
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Exactly. And if it's presented in this real world way, you know, absolutely, I would.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I like the idea.
Sign me up. Which statue do I pray to get to go in the egg?
Don't start a cult. I am an egghead.
I am an egghead. Cuckoo, cachoo.
And honestly, you know, the idea of just getting away from everyone would be lovely. Airstream or no.
Oh, that makes me think of the Beatles song. Do you think that has anything to do with the egg?
I don't know.
It has I am the Eggman.
Oh,
I am the walrus. Cuckoo, cachoo. I love you. I don't know what the walrus has anything to do with the story, but, you know.
I don't know either. But yeah, to close out, quote from Matheny himself. TFYQA. Think for yourself, question authority. So yeah, that is the story of Ong's hat.
Ong's hat. That was a... Woo!
They get weirder.
Get weirder?
Oh, we have some ones that I have planned that are...
interdimensional travels.
Yeah, and other stuff. It's gonna be a...
Okay.
I have journeys for us planned.
Okay, I'm down.
All right.
Take it from this unworldly side of the mic. Don't believe everything you hear. Beggars Belief online wherever you get podcasts and YouTube. Please leave reviews at Beggars Belief Podcast.